Hello everybody, welcome along. My name is Benjamin Bloom. This is the Benjamin Bloom Football Channel. Please leave your bias at the door and join me in reacting to another Championship manager out of a job because Cardiff have sacked their manager. The Millwall legend Neil Harris is done. He becomes the 7th manager to leave their post and follows Vladimir Ivic, Gerhard Struber, Sabri Lamouchi, Philip Koku, Gary Monk and Tony Pulis out of the door at their respective positions and jobs and clubs this season. I didn't think that Tan, the Cardiff chairman, would go this early. Pressure has been building on Harris. 5 defeats on the trot last night, home defeat against QPR, and he has pulled the trigger. Remember, Cardiff, a Year 2 parachute team. Parachute payments run out next season. And we know what that tends to mean for the teams that don't manage to do the job whilst they've still got them. Anyway, let's talk our way through this. Harris took over 16th of November 2019. So what is that? 12, 13 months. We'll call it 14 months in post. When he took over, Cardiff had played 16 games. They were 7 points off the playoffs. Like I said, a Year 1 parachute team, Cardiff, last season, and would have been looking to press home the advantage. Didn't quite work with Neil Warnock coming back down. I don't know what was missing there, and very quietly for Warnock, actually, mutual consent sort of out the door in the winter, and in comes Harris, and he does in the end make up that 7 points and get Cardiff into the playoffs. You can see up there in 5th position. Now, it would be churlish of me not to tip my hat to Neil Harris and say well done, got into the playoffs, but there are a few considerations where we can say, were they that convincing last season under Harris? Still full of a lot of the players that played in the Premier League and indeed got them up, and obviously in receipt of that Year 1 parachute payment. There's some mitigating factors, isn't there? There's COVID and the lockdown, which certainly put paid to some teams. There's Nottingham Forest's massive collapse. They looked nailed on all season, which opened up a spot. Obviously Cardiff in 5th, so they didn't creep in like Swansea did at the last minute. The other thing I would say is it was low tide. Look, 4 teams at the top, 81, 81, 83 and 93. Had Swansea won in the playoffs, they would have been the joint lowest ever point scorer to win the playoffs. So there was a sense, there was one very good team in the league last season. 3 teams nearly there in West Brom, Brentford and Fulham, and then the rest. And there was very much of a sense that Cardiff were the best of the rest, weren't they? Without really being anywhere near those other 4 teams above them. But we tipped the cap. He got in there, but they lost. They came up against Scott Parker's Fulham. You can see right at the end of that first leg, killer goal there to put a 2-0 deficit in. However, Cardiff led for a lot of the second leg. They got in front and were immediately paired back, but took the lead at the start of the second half. Fulham looked a bit nervy, and from 47 minutes onwards, 1 Cardiff goal took that to extra time, but they didn't quite manage to, I wouldn't say lay a glove on Fulham, but there was a sense that they didn't want to come out too far because they knew Fulham were a good side and didn't necessarily leave everything out there, I wouldn't say. So I suppose if you're analysing the first Neil Harris season, taking over in November, finishing in the playoffs and losing by 1 goal to the eventual promoted teams, you'd have to give him a pass in terms of the first season. But we have to remember with parachute payments, and the parachute FFP era means that if you have that payment, your broadcast money is so much higher than everybody else's. I know I bang on about it, but it's such a huge thing. And when, like Cardiff, you're up and straight back down, you only get 2 years of it. And that's very, very different than the 3 years where we know that a manager gets that little bit longer, whereas in a 2-year parachute cycle, Cardiff know if they are not up at the end of this season, that they're in the hat with everybody else and you have to recruit. And of course, here come another 3 teams with that giant broadcast payment that you get in year 1. So there's really always this sense with relegated teams, especially ones that have only been up for 1 season, like Fulham were last season. They managed to get over the line, didn't they? There's this sense that the second you go down, the clock is ticking for those payments to run out. And unless you're setting up recruitment that brings in equal money, you really have to pull something out of the hat to try and compete. And I think that might have worked against Harris. They needed results and they needed them fast. Here's what happened in the summer. So let's look at the outgoings first. And this is where we do need to talk about recruitment. Cardiff with Warnock, it was a typically, sort of disparate, strung together Neil Warnock squad, and he manages to get the best out of them. No massive assets to perhaps cash in on upon a relegation and build a squad on. And that is really what you need sometimes, that ability to retool. Etheridge goes out to Birmingham. Well, that was because Smithies took on the keeping position. Ward, Bogle and Flint, they must have lost a bit of money on Flint, I have to say. That didn't work out. Callum Patterson goes to Sheffield Wednesday. What are you going to do? In terms of coming in, you can argue that in the Championship, post-COVID, in this era, they did actually back him. Because Kiefer Moore comes in for a couple of £1 million, the perfect striker for Neil Warnock, a tall target man, good at Championship level. Harry Wilson on loan, Osei Tutu, Ojo, Phillips as well as a backup, Benkovic on loan. We know that the model now is, even for the top teams, the parachute teams, it's loans with obligations to buy. We've seen loads of those now, haven't we? West Brom with Pereira last season, Leeds with Helder Costa, Norwich have done one with Ben Gibson and this Greek fullback they've just signed. So in terms of backing and in comparison with the rest of the division in COVID times, that's a fairly decent sort of haul, especially in terms of Moore and Wilson, who are essentially both proven Championship players. Wilson on loan with Hull and with Derby, and Moore obviously scoring goals last season for Wigan. So there was some sense of backing in context. Of course, it's not, 35 million quid spent on a load of players and that type of thing. But there was some sense of backing, I think we would agree, to what was a tired squad. And yeah, it just hasn't worked out. You can see those 5 defeats on the trot. Only 8 wins in the 24 games, 11 defeats, down in 15th position there, below Luton, below Huddersfield, and 9 points above the relegation zone. That is the who scored kind of projection of who Harris has used the most times in the most positions. It gives us some kind of guide. It's not bad, is it? Smithies is proven Championship. So is Morrison. So is Bennett. Nelson's working his way in. Tutu and Ojo, young loanees. Volks and Pack. Pack definitely proven Championship. Volks getting that way. Wilson, Hoylett, Moore. And speaking of Moore, he probably should have done more with that team, shouldn't he? And it just hasn't, unfortunately, worked out for Neil Harris. It seems ruthless. It seems harsh. But I think if you factor in the sense of some kind of backing in the summer, the fact that it's a parachute team and they're running out at the end of the season, maybe Vincent Tan is thinking, crikey, I don't think we're going to go up with this guy this season, so I'm going to throw the Hail Mary pass in there and we'll bring someone else in and see if they can get a tune out of that team straight away. And in terms of what next, there's some out-of-work managers. I just tapped that into Transfermarkt. Howe, Pearson, Neil Adams, don't know why he's coming up there. Cowley, Woodgate, Adkins, Monk, who's managed Swansea. Obviously, the Cowleys, Danny and Nicky Cowley, Danny would be the manager, get linked with a lot of Championship jobs. And they did go into Huddersfield last season. We can call Huddersfield a parachute team, but they didn't get to use any of the money because it all went on the on the takeover that got done there. But there is form for the Cowleys coming into the Championship in a ex sort of Premier League club and sorting things out. But that was to avoid relegation. Paul Cook's an interesting one. Wigan were good. So who knows there? And of course, a couple of my old favourites. Tony Pulis, very short tenure at Sheffield Wednesday, a Welshman. As I said at the time, if you get the Pulis that managed Palace or many of those years at Stoke, then happy days. And of course, Mick McCarthy went off to Cyprus, didn't he, strangely? And that didn't last very long. But wily old fox knows the division. So lots of names out there. You think someone like Eddie Howe might be waiting for a Premier League job or something with a bit more in terms of, maybe a parachute job that opened up right at the start of the relegation, not with only 6 months left. So it'll be very, very interesting to see what comes in. They have been fairly stable, actually. I'm not entirely sure when Vincent Tan took over. I think it's during the Malky Mackay era. And you can see Solskjaer, Slade, well, that was a couple of years. Trollope, that was not so long. Warnock, that obviously went very well. Stable-ish if you compare to some Championship clubs who change manager literally every year. So, let me know what you think. In terms of my opinion, we could see it coming. I thought it might be a sort of Alex Neil at Norwich, Lee Johnson at Bristol City type situation where they were going to give him this season, come what may, and the second they were mathematically not looking like making the playoffs at all, whether that's 10 games, 8 games to go or what have you, then I thought he'd go. But they've gone early, and that presumably is that they think maybe someone can do it this season or next season, and they're giving them a run at it. Whichever way, they didn't think they were going to be going, and ultimately as a parachute team and as a team who's been in the Premier League recently, the standard has to be working towards promotion and a team that was in the playoffs. So they didn't think it was going to happen. Let me know what you think in the comments in terms of Harris and where it was going. And it does seem a bit of an understandable one given all of those facets that I've mentioned. And of course, our favourite thing, speculate. Who do you think would be good for the job? Maybe you're a Cardiff fan. Who would you like to see do the job? Is it one of those out of work guys? Is it somebody in a job? Or would it be somebody we've not heard of? I don't know how Brexit affects European managers coming over now. Will we get any more unknown, successful European managers? Let me know what you think in the comments. But we have to tip our cap and say, will we see him soon? Neil Harris, sacked by Cardiff. I wonder where Harris comes back now. Interesting. There's a manager under pressure at Millwall. I don't know whether he'd be welcome back there in open arms. Do you think Harris comes back at Championship level? Has this peaked for him now? Was Cardiff last season the big chance to go big in management, or do you think we'll see Harris in a good Championship job again in the future? Let me know what you think in the comments. Neil Harris sacked by Cardiff. Get going in the comments. Over and out. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button to see more videos from this channel. Hit the subscribe button and to be notified every time we upload. Ring the bell for those notifications to come through on your device. If you really want to support the channel and me as a content creator, I will be eternally grateful if you head over to the merch store and grab something, or support over on Patreon, patreon.com/Benjamin Bloom. Thank you for your time. Go and watch another video.